Martin from Mother Do Pipes. It's Sunday evening. I'm in the workshop, and as I promised in my last video, I'm just going to do a video tonight explaining how we start drilling a piece of briar in order to make a pipe. So I'm going to attach the camera up here where hopefully you'll have a good view of the lathe, and I'll show you the processes involved. So this is a piece of briar. As I said previously, these are some of the last of a batch that I bought, and they're not necessarily the best pieces, but I think we should be able to make a nice partially bent pipe out of this block. The first part of the process is to mark up the pipe, and as you can see, I've marked up a centre line and drawn a rough shape of the pipe together with the axis of the mortise and the axis of the draft hole and the tobacco chamber here. Now I've centered this up on the lathe, and I find the easiest way to do this is to make sure that with a ruler, that the point of the drill bit and the shank line up with the centre line, and also line up with the hole that you want to drill. As you can see, I've got a Forstner bit in the lathe because the first part of this process is to face this end of the shank in order to get a flat surface. So I'll start the lathe and we'll do that. As you can see, we now have a flat surface here, which is important to get a good junction between the shank and the stem. The next step is going to be to drill the mortise. For the mortise hole, I use an 8mm brad point drill. This is obviously drilled in the same axis as the Forstner bit. I've already pre-marked this with some masking tape for the depth of my mortise, which should be around 12mm. And finally, in order to finish off the mortise, I'm just going to give it a light countersink to bevel the edge of the mortise hole. That should be enough. The next step, whilst this block is still attached in this orientation, is going to be to turn the shank to as roughly round as possible. As you can see from the way the block's attached, to quite limited as to how much turning of the shank we can do. before the edge of the bowl starts to encroach on what you're doing. But I find that it's useful at this stage to at least start to get things concentric as much as possible. Obviously, we have a lot of square edges on here, and we need to go a little bit carefully at first, because you're quite likely to either knock the block off the centre, or worse still, send it flying, which has the potential for some quite nasty injuries. Okay, so I've turned the end of the shank round, which is going to allow me to fit a copper cap, and we're now about to drill the draft hole. As you can see, I've realigned the block as on a curved pipe. The direction of the mortise is usually different to the direction of the draft hole. So we've made sure everything's realigned again with the ruler, and also measured this distance here, and which is to the bottom of the tobacco chamber, and I've marked this with some masking tape. So I'm going to drill the draft hole with the masking tape, and now that's the draft hole drilled. Okay, so now I've prepared the shank and the mortise and the draft hole. The next step is to start drilling the tobacco chamber. I've realigned the block on the chuck, and we just check that the alignment of the tobacco chamber is correct here and in this direction, that lines up with the centre of the draft hole. Stem process now is to face the top of the bowl with the porcelain bit. This time obviously a little larger than the one we used for the shank. We've got a good smooth face there, and next I'm going to use a 16mm spade bit to remove most of the material from the tobacco chamber down to about this level, which will make the drilling of the tobacco chamber itself somewhat easier. I'm going to mark the depth which I'm going to drill on the bit, and then we put that into the chuck. And we can start drilling. That done, we can drill the bottom of the tobacco chamber, and for this I'm using a round nose routed bit. The correct depth is to about the top of this piece of masking tape, although usually it needs a little fine adjustment to make sure the holes are exactly at the bottom of the chamber. It's obviously important not to over drill the tobacco chamber, as that will leave the hole sitting a little too high at the bottom. Well, I think that's just about where I want it. That's excellent. And the next process will be to go on and turn as much of the bowl as possible. Obviously we can't turn the lower part of the bowl because the shank is in the way, but we can get the top nicely concentric. Okay, so I've turned the bowl and given everything a rough sand. This is about as far as we can go on the lathe. The rest of the shaping of the bowl and so on will have to be done with a sanding disc and files, and that's going to be the subject of my next video. But until then, have a good evening and see you soon.